much for this nice introduction, and thank you also for having just organized before I come to you, therefore my small delay, discussion with the president of the university, because I know how important it is that we extend our cooperation not only in the academic and teaching outreach, but also institutionally. I said to the president that we would like to see more Korean students coming to Europe. Of course, also more European students coming to Seoul. But in particular, as we have seen in the last years, that the interest of young Korean students to go to Europe has decreased. We have been once 15% of all the Korean students coming to Europe, much more went to US and to Australia, and the figure went down now to 11%. So I can just announce to you that very soon we will publish our call for the Erasmus Plus program again, and we invite you to apply, to spend a year also in one of the 28 European member countries. Of course, you can improve there your English, but you can also study in English and live in French, Spanish, German, Polish environment, and to see the variety and diversity of Europe in academic, but also in the European way of life. And so I'm happy to come here to speak about a subject which is so crucial for both countries, for the member countries, but also for Korea, namely about climate change. I was told that behind this, yes, there should be a PowerPoint presentation. But I must tell you, I prefer that I address you first directly for one reason. It was just 1 hour before I came here that in Paris the overview for the contributions of 146 countries for the big climate conference in Paris on the 1st December was presented. With the help of Professor Park, I have even the printout of this, just received when I entered already the university. Now I realize this is in French, so I will not bother you with a French lecture. No, I have prepared my lecture in English, of course, and I would just then add a few items for recapitulation after this from the slides I have prepared for you as well. But again, the subject is so topical, as you can just see what was published in Paris today, that we are in fact only 4 weeks until the Paris Climate Conference, which will also be attended by President Park and a huge Korean delegation, when we expect that a new global climate agreement will be concluded in Paris in just 4 weeks. This is a historical milestone, and people all around the world are looking to their leaders for a signal that they are ready and willing to take decisive action to tackle climate change. I can tell you, with 147 countries in the world who have indicated their climate policy and emission reductions, we are about more than double than the 60 countries which have indicated such objectives in the Copenhagen and Cancun conference in 2009 and 2010, and only less than 30 countries of the world have agreed to the Kyoto Protocol 20 years ago. So we see that more and more understand and realize this huge challenge for the planet, for mankind, because according to the actual figures, where we would see an exchange emission increase worldwide, we would arrive in a heating of our global temperatures between 5 and 6 degrees up to the end of this century. The idea of the climate conference, and this is the 21st conference already, which will take place in Paris, is that the increase of temperature globally should be lower. It should be lower than 2 degrees until the end of the century. And what we can see from all the indications given by the countries so far shows that we will still, with these proposals, arrive at a heating of about 3 to 4%. So a lot has been done, but not enough yet, because major emerging countries, and in fact Korea belongs to them as well, would further increase in absolute terms, even if they would decrease the augmentation of the emissions in the future. We have seen growing momentum, however, for a strong agreement, from the commitment of political leaders in gatherings such as the G7 and the Major Economics Forum, to calls for climate action from world-face leaders, the Pope recently, and citizens across the world. And it was great to hear that also President Park has reaffirmed her commitment in contributing to tackle climate change at the last UN General Assembly in New York, and also recently agreed to open a new frontier in cooperation with the United States to effectively respond to worsening climate change. She said, and we are very happy with this approach, that climate change should not be understood as a burden, but as an opportunity. And we have continuously invited Korea, in fact, to take more opportunities, because you might know Korea is the 7th biggest emitter of CO2 worldwide, with a global share of 1.4%. Therefore, it's vitally important that in these next weeks we work together to drive progress at political and negotiating levels to ensure that Paris will be a success. The European Union, its 28 member states, and Korea have a strong and long-standing relationship on climate change. I was pleased to see that Korea has submitted its intended contribution to the new agreement, because it's vitally important that all countries commit to adopting a new agreement and playing their part in tackling climate change. Some countries will, of course, be required to commit to greater efforts than others. The industrialized countries are ready to pave the way, and the European Union itself has committed to reduce its climate emissions until 2030 by 40% based on the 1991 figures. We therefore hope that other major economies also take the lead, in particular the G20 members. But for the new agreement to be a success, we must have as many countries as possible to sign up. 146 is the figure as it stands now. Early action today, ladies and gentlemen, saves costs later and helps to prevent the most severe consequences of climate change. The EU, therefore, was the first major economy to submit its contributions, and also Korea has now taken some positive steps, taking on an ambitious emission reduction target of minus 30% by 2020, and Korea submitted in June its pledge to reduce 37% of its emissions by 2030, below the business as usual, the BAU deadline. This target will be achieved here in Korea by 25.7% domestic reduction and 11.3% international reduction bought by the international market mechanism emission certificates from other countries, which is also insofar problematic as we don't know how in detail this buying of certificates for emissions in other countries will work. It is the first country in Asia in Korea, which implements a countrywide national emission trading scheme since January 2015. And multilaterally, Korea has played a constructive role in specific areas, such as the Climate Change Fund, which is hosted here in Seoul, and established also the Global Green Growth Institute, meaning that your country here has an important stake in the international climate architecture. The Paris Agreement now offers governments a unique opportunity to show their ability to come together to respond to a decisive global challenge. The agreement will be a test for effective multilateralism also in other areas, and it will be a test on our ability to lead, act, and deliver globally. Tackling such a global challenge will require comprehensive, inclusive global action, and there is no alternative, and nobody might be left behind. The new agreement must be legally binding. This is the first criteria of the negotiators from the European side. It must be ambitious, fair to all countries worldwide, and applicable to all with as wide as possible participation. For us in Europe, it's a top priority to reach an agreement, and we are committed to working together with our partners to make the negotiation a success. And so we discuss and deal still in detail with all our partner countries, also in Korea, whether one or other will be able even to improve its pledge so far taken. For example, we cannot see yet how the 1/3 of emission reduction from Korea can be bought abroad, how a price mechanism will function, and how the emission trading system, which was introduced here in Korea, can become more efficient and also get the ownership of the big conglomerates of industry and business. And here, Korea is a special case because you have, in between most countries of the world, the highest share of export in your economy and also the highest share of industrial production. 32%, as I understand from Korean statistics, of production is in the manufacturing sector. The leading countries in Europe, Czech Republic and Germany, are just standing at 24%. UK, France, between 10 and 12% only. So this gives two indications. This says first that the potential for reduction here is much bigger because you start from a manufacturing share of 32%. But second, of course, it's quite clear this is the backbone of the Korean economy, and all measures you take in this regard will directly go to the core also of the competitiveness and the output and the efficiency of the industry as a whole. Insofar, it's a quite difficult policy decision, and it needs all the support and ownership also of industry that the pledge which is made is then also properly implemented. A number of countries are reluctant to agree to some forms of binding deal. Therefore, it's in our view up to these countries to demonstrate a convincing alternative that gives the necessary long-term signals that citizens, markets and decision makers need. I don't see yet this convincing alternative. Therefore, we should stick, as it was published this morning in Paris, to the approach which was so far published and we have followed the last years. Korea's energy consumption and energy mix have a strong bearing on its CO2 commitments. Korea ranks 11th highest in the world in terms of energy consumption and is the 5th and 4th largest importer of oil and coal, respectively. Korea imports a staggering 90% of its energy, amounting to 184.8 billion in 2012, the monetary equivalent of nearly 1/3 of the total imports. 1/3 of total imports of Korea are in energy. So you see also the huge potential energy saving, fuel efficiency, and climate measures would have on the overall trade and current account. In order to shift to a low carbon economy, we have worked together to find a way to cooperate in a dynamic way. The European Union and Korea have worked closely together for the introduction of the emission trading scheme to help reduce industry emissions. And we have said we will reduce our greenhouse gas emissions domestically, not by buying foreign certificates, but domestically by at least 40% compared to 1990 in Europe. This ambitious policy framework in place will ensure that these strong commitments will also deliver in implementation. Alongside the ambitious emission reduction target are an EU-wide binding target for renewable energies. We want at least 27% of our overall energy being produced by renewable sources, and we also want to increase our energy efficiency target by 27% until the end of this decade. And we have a good track record in Europe also that gives us, and you should copy insofar, the confidence that we meet our goals. We are on track to meet or even exceed our 2020 target, and so we can stay optimistic also of what the Europeans will achieve until 2030. For example, between 1990 and 2013, our emissions fell already by 19%, while our GDP has increased by 45%. So the decoupling of emissions and economic growth is a core element of the renewable and sustainable energy and economic policies. So the EU is taking strong action to reduce our emissions, and we make the transition to a low carbon economy. And we are supporting other countries and encouraging everybody to do the same. The effects of climate change are being felt well all around the world. And we can also see in Korea as well. In recent years, droughts have become more and more frequent and more severe. And in fact, since I'm here, since the 1st September, I have missed rain in Korea. And you have seen the figures of precipitation, not only in the south, but also heavily in the north of the peninsula, which already in former years led to some humanitarian problems and disasters. We know that well-planned early adaptation action saves money and lives. Funding for climate action, therefore, will be crucial too. Many countries struggle to raise the required financing and will need help for the global effort to succeed. The EU, therefore, is also a major provider of climate finance. Alone in 2013, we paid $12 billion to other countries in the world outside Europe. Half of all the pledges for the Korea Green Climate Fund came from the member states of the European Union. Korea, as a host country, pledged to contribute $100 million over the 5 next years to the Global Climate Fund to support their work in developing countries to respond to climate change. And cooperating closely here with the Climate Fund in Seoul, I always encourage Korea to do a bit more in this regard. The transformation to low-emission, climate-resilient economies and societies will only be achieved through large-scale shifts in investment patterns. For this reason, all countries need to look at ways of mobilizing finance for climate-smart development. And the private sector has a key role to play in this. In Korea, where we are in a technology very advanced country, Korean companies and the government are investing in developing new green technologies that is the smart grid, carbon capture storage, and new and renewable energy sources. Last week, I opened here together with Korean politicians the Eco Innovation Forum, which gave another boost in sustainable production for new materials and chemicals in order to save the carbon footprint mankind is leaving behind. And we see a lot of opportunities for both sides to cooperate also in all these aspects. Those, ladies and gentlemen, that support a strong Paris deal should take every opportunity to speak out and make their position clear. This is what I'm trying to do here. Civil society has an important role to play too in raising awareness among the public and putting pressure on governments to show leadership. There's a lot of work still to do in the coming weeks to prepare for Paris and ensure we can achieve a legally binding, fair and ambitious new target that keeps us on track to our below 2-degree objective. Today, by sharing experiences in discussing the good work happening here in Korea, as well as the challenges Korea is still facing, we can be part of the process of an agreement in Paris. I look forward to our busy program in the next week. I wish us all success, and I also must underline that with Paris, the implementation phase will just start. So work will not be done when on 10 December your president will return home, but then the work of the experts and the implementing bodies in all countries will continue in order to make the fight against climate change real. Thank you very much for attention. And if you want so, we can have also a short look to what was prepared, what I got prepared in the slides, which brings us back to the scientific foundation of the climate change issues. And you might know that recently a Korean, Mr. Lee, was elected to be the new head of this IPPC, which has come out several times with its reports and assessment of a climate change feature on Earth since 1850, in fact, when industrialization began in Europe. You see some comparable figures of reductions, but also of emissions. And you can also see that the huge increase with peaks only much later in the case of China will arrive. So what the industrialized countries do must be copied, of course, as well by the emerging countries. They must be financed for the developing countries. So these are just